Here we are again. I'm a professor at this university, and I was attempting to summarize my entire Introduction to Ethics course in one video lecture. I failed, and so now we need to do part 2. In part 1, we talked about Jeremy Bentham and Peter Singer and Immanuel Kant and Aristotle, and now we're going to talk about Nietzsche, and so just like the last time, I'm going to edit this video fast. We start with a work by Friedrich Nietzsche called On the Genealogy of Morals. This work is divided up into essays, and we're going to talk about the first essay, and in this essay, Nietzsche answers the question, why be moral? In the first half of this video, which you should watch and I'll link to in the description or whatever, we saw what Aristotle's answer to this question was. Aristotle's answer was, the reason you should be moral is because it will make you happy. Nietzsche's answer to this question, why be moral, is don't. Don't be moral because morality is for losers. In order to understand what Nietzsche's saying here, you need to understand the distinction between true objective moral facts, if there are any, and conventional morality. By conventional morality, I just mean the accepted moral code of a society, what that society as a group believes, what they believe about ethics or morality. And by true or objective morality, I mean the real one true moral law, the facts about what's right and wrong that this believed moral system is trying to capture. If you understand this distinction, then you understand that there's some controversy about whether this thing even exists, but there's no controversy about whether this exists. Conventional morality is definitely real because it just means the moral beliefs of groups of people, and groups of people definitely have moral beliefs. Nietzsche is talking just about this. He's talking about conventional morality, specifically the bourgeois, middle-class, European, Christianized moral code. This is your moral code, and he's going to be criticizing it. He's going to be criticizing the idea that people should be humble, and that they should be kind, and that institutions should be fair and just and democratic. The idea that aggression is bad, and that self-promotion and self-aggrandizement, that these are bad things. This moral perspective, which Nietzsche thinks is dominant at the time that he's writing, and is, if it was dominant then it's dominant now. It's your moral view, and he thinks that it's wrong. He's going to give a genealogy of it, or an origin story. Genealogy is just the word that means the study of lineage. Here's what he's trying to do. He's trying to say where this moral code comes from. He's trying to tell you where you got your moral beliefs from. And he thinks once he's exposed the origin of your moral beliefs, then you won't be so attracted to them. You'll think, oh, those are sort of silly. I can abandon this moral code that my society has given me. Nietzsche provocatively labels this genealogy the Slave Revolt. Once upon a time, he says, sometime around when the ancient Romans ruled most of the earth, there were powerful people. And these powerful people were strong and aggressive and cruel, and that was thought to be good. Whoever was common or ordinary or plebeian, the powerless, were thought to be bad. He thinks that he knows this was the case because of the origin of the word good. Nietzsche writes, the signpost to the right road was for me the question, what was the real etymological significance of the designations for good coined in the various languages? I found they all led back to the same conceptual transformation. Everywhere, noble, aristocratic in the social sense, is the basic concept from which good, in the sense of with aristocratic soul, noble, with a soul of a high order, with a privileged soul, necessarily developed. A development which always runs parallel with that other in which common, plebeian, low, are finally transformed into the concept bad. The most convincing example of the latter is the German word schlecht, bad, itself, which is identical with schlicht, plain, simple. Compare schlechtweg, plainly, schlechterdings, simply, and originally designated the plain, the common man, as yet with no inculpatory implication, and simply in contradistinction to the nobility. Well, okay, what did all that mean? What Nietzsche means is that the word good originally just meant aristocratic, or rich, or powerful, and the word bad had no inculpatory implication. The word bad just meant common, plain, ordinary. But then he thinks there was a slave revolt. Not literal slaves, but the powerless people. These people, they rose up and imposed themselves as the good ones and their characteristics as the good ones, and they demoted the powerful people and changed their characteristics from good to, well, now it's not bad. Now it's not good versus bad, it's good versus evil. This revolt wasn't a physical overthrowing of the dominating people, the dominating powerful people. No, this was a sort of moral revolt or revolution whereby the people who were not in charge sort of convinced everyone somehow that being aggressive or being warlike or being dominating, all of those characteristics that were thought to be good beforehand, well, those things are actually evil. And what's good is, well, our characteristics, us, the powerless, being meek and being humble and that sort of thing. That's right. Are you following? He's saying that a long time ago, there was a moral system according to which being kind or being gentle was not good. And Nietzsche says that the only reason that you think that being kind or being gentle is morally good is because you're just so deep in it. You're just stuck in the moral system that resulted from this slave revolt, which he calls the priestly mode of valuation. Whatever, that's just his word for this system of conventional morality that results. Once you know about this system of morality, you're supposed to just realize that there's nothing so great about it. And so then you realize that being moral, at least according to this code of morality, it's something that you don't have to do, because it was just made up by the losers. Now that we're done with Nietzsche, we're going to try to answer this question. Are there objective moral facts? We're going to start with someone who gives the answer no. And that person is the greatest philosopher of the Scottish Enlightenment, David Hume. Hume is operating with something like the following principle. Only believe in the existence of stuff that you or someone else trustworthy have experienced, or that must exist in order to explain stuff we do experience. You believe in the existence of trees, they're real because you've experienced trees. And you believe in the existence of some faraway place, even if you've never been there, because someone else who you trust has been there and told you about it, or they wrote about it in a book and you trust the book because it's a trustworthy book. And then there are the things like electrons that have not been experienced, or at least hadn't been experienced when it was first rational to believe in them. You believe in those because of other things that we do experience, like we experience the results that we read out of certain equipment. And the best explanation for those results, which we do experience, is the existence of electrons or whatever. So this covers all the stuff that we're supposed to believe in, and it excludes all the things we're not supposed to believe in, like unicorns. Hume applies this principle, which seems like a very rational one. He applies it to morality, and he gets the result that, oh, we don't need to believe in moral facts, objective moral facts, in order to explain anything that we experience. And so then he thinks it's irrational to believe in the existence of objective morality. He writes, take any action allowed to be vicious, willful murder, for instance. Examine it in all lights and see if you can find that matter of fact or real existence which you call vice. What he's asking here is for you to imagine experiencing some bad thing. Like you're watching someone murder someone else. You're experiencing the murder, but do you experience the wrongness? The murder is happening, the knife is there, and the blood is real. You experience those things. But the badness, is the badness there? The vice entirely escapes you, as long as you consider the object. By the object, he means the thing out there in the world that you're experiencing, the event, the murder. But what you're looking for in this experience is the vice, the badness, the moral evil. Do you experience that? You never can find it till you turn your reflection into your own breast and find a sentiment of disapprobation which arises in you towards this action. Here is a matter of fact, but 'tis an object of feeling. It lies in yourself, not in the object. Hume's point is that the only thing that we experience that seems to be anywhere close to moral badness is just your own feelings of disliking this action that you're witnessing, this violent act. But if that's all that we find, then according to this principle, you shouldn't believe in objective morality. It's not out there in the world outside of your own mind. Well, if there were objective moral facts, where would they come from? One answer is given by John Locke. And his answer is that objective moral facts come from God. Locke was a philosopher living in England in the 1600s, and he presented this argument. 1. God created human beings. 2. If X creates Y, then Y is X's property. 3. Therefore, these little 3 dots, they mean therefore. They're just a shorthand for therefore. Therefore, human beings are God's property. Okay, that's the first part of the argument. God created human beings. If something creates something else, then the first thing owns the second thing. So God owns human beings. Humans are God's property. All right, interim conclusion. Keep going. 4. We must not harm someone else's property. 5. Therefore, we must not harm human beings. This is an argument that goes from the fact that God exists and has certain characteristics, did certain things like created human beings. It goes from that to the conclusion that we must not harm human beings. So what this argument does is it derives a certain moral claim about what human beings must do. And this, you might think, is a model for the origin of objective moral facts. That's a very natural thought. Now here's the thing. This argument might be perfectly good. Like, it might very well be that premise 1 is true, premise 2 is true, premise 4 is true, 3 really does follow from 1 and 2, 5 really does follow from 4 and 3. It may be a totally valid or legit argument. I'm not arguing with any of that. I'm not objecting to any of that. But notice something. You can't use an argument of this style. You can't do it. You can't use an argument of this style in order to show where all objective moral facts come from in the first place. They can't all come from God, at least not via this route. Here's why. You see it? It's right there. You see it? That. What is that? Look at that. What is that? In premise 4, we're assuming that there's a moral fact. We must not harm someone else's property. It may be that we must not harm human beings, and Locke may be right that it's true that this moral obligation, this objective moral obligation may exist, and it may come from God. It may come from the fact that God made us and owns us. Maybe. But this argument relies on the prior existence of some moral facts, some objective moral facts. So it cannot explain where all moral facts come from. I'll say it another way. You can't use God to explain the existence of all objective moral facts if in doing so, you have to appeal to some prior existing, putative, objective moral fact. This objection actually is older than Locke, who was writing in the 1600s. It comes all the way from Plato, who was writing in like the negative 300s or something like that. I'll put up the dates on the screen. Plato was the student of Socrates. Socrates walked around a bunch, and Plato wrote dialogues, wrote stories about Socrates. One of those dialogues is called Euthyphro, because it's about a conversation between Socrates and some guy named Euthyphro. Euthyphro meets up with Socrates like by the courthouse because Euthyphro is prosecuting his own father for murder. You don't have to know the details, but if you do, if you want to know the details, I have a whole video about this dialogue explaining it in detail. The point is this. Euthyphro seems to know a lot about what's right and wrong because he's confident enough in his beliefs about what's right and wrong to prosecute his own father. So Socrates asks him what virtue is, and then they have a discussion, and I'm going to summarize that discussion right now. So Socrates asks this guy Euthyphro, what is virtue? And Euthyphro says, virtue is what is loved by the gods. So whatever actions the gods, or we can say God if we think there's just one God, whatever action or actions are loved by the gods, those are the good ones. Those are the moral ones. Those are the ethical ones. But then Socrates asks this question, are the acts virtuous because the gods love them? Or do the gods love them because they are virtuous? This is a question about the order of explanatory priority. You don't have to know that technical term. What you have to understand is that the issue is, are they morally good first, and then because they're good, the gods love those actions? Or do the gods love them first, and the fact that the gods love them makes them those virtuous? Okay, well, Euthyphro gives an answer. He says, oh, the gods love them because they are virtuous. So they're virtuous first, and then because they're already virtuous, those are the ones that the gods choose to love. because the gods are good or whatever and they love good things. Oh, but then Socrates points out, you haven't answered my question. If the reason that the gods love them is because they're already virtuous, then what made them virtuous in the first place? We haven't answered the original question. This was exactly the problem with using Locke's argument, which might be a perfectly good argument for its own purposes, but using it to explain the origin of objective moral facts. If there have to be objective moral facts in order for that argument to work, then that argument can't explain where objective moral facts come from. There's a lot more to say about this dialogue by Plato, and I say a lot more in the full video about this, but right here we're cramming a whole semester into one video, or two. You might be thinking at this point that the right answer to this question is no. No, there are no objective moral facts, and the main reason for concluding that there are no objective moral facts is the argument that David Hume gave, 2 minutes ago, or if this was a whole semester, like 3 weeks ago. There's a problem, though. There's a problem with that argument. So what I need to do at this point is I need to go back to David Hume, get that principle from Hume back up on the board so that we can assess whether or not we can use it to rule out the existence of objective moral facts. And we're going to get that principle from David Hume back up onto the board through the magic of editing. This was Hume's principle, and it was based on this principle that we seemed to get an argument against the existence of objective moral facts. It seems like there's no reason to believe in any fact about what you should or shouldn't do. But notice something about this principle. It tells you what to do. Only believe in the existence of stuff that blah, 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 blah. It's like an order or a command. What it really means is you should only believe in this stuff. This is a fact about what you should do. You should only believe in the existence of things that you experience, blah, 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 blah. And this seems to rule out the existence of objective moral facts. But think about what kinds of facts moral facts are. They're facts about should, about what you should do. In moral philosophy, we call these sorts of facts normative. That's our technical term for them. You don't have to worry about this technical term. You just have to know that these are not facts about how things are. They're facts about how they ought to be. According to this principle, if it's right and if you follow it, then you should stop believing in moral facts about how things should be. But this fact itself is normative. It's a fact about how things should be. It's not a moral claim. This isn't a moral claim. This is a claim that falls into the category of what we technically call epistemic normativity. Epistemic means having to do with belief or knowledge. Episteme is the Greek word for knowledge. This is a principle of rationality, but it's a principle about what you ought to do rationally. And the moral facts, the objective moral facts, they're principles of objective moral normativity. So if this principle rules out moral facts, because they're normative and normative facts aren't needed to explain what we experience, then this principle should also rule out epistemic normative facts. It should also rule out itself. If this principle for what's rational to believe in means that you can't believe in moral facts because the moral facts aren't things you can observe, they're things about how things ought to be, they're facts about how things ought to be, well then this principle is also going to rule out itself. Because a fact about what you should believe in, rationally speaking, is not something that you experience. You don't experience the fact that you should believe in this or that, and no one experiences it, and you don't need to posit it in order to explain the things we do experience. So this principle doesn't work. At least it doesn't work in every case. If it rules out moral normativity, if it rules out morality, objective morality, then it also rules out itself.